Okay, well, good morning, everyone. We've got a lot of people showing up here this morning with us. I'm so glad that you could join us for this special virtual legislative forum this morning. Typically, we are doing this in person in the Great Bend Chamber of Commerce boardroom, but we're trying to be safe, and I'm hopeful that we can maybe come together again soon, a month or two down the road, or later on in a place where we can spread out a little bit more. My name is Megan Barfield. I'm the president of Great Bend Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just so honored to have all four of our representatives here with us this morning. As the past few years, as they have done, Hutch Regional Medical Center has graciously sponsored this forum for us to happen every year. Richard Shank unfortunately couldn't be here, as Hutch is doing something very similar this morning at the same time. So we're dividing and conquering, and Mike Johnson has offered to step in and help as a moderator this morning. So I'm really grateful to him. Mike owns M&M Equipment and is a trustee with Barton Community College. And I think, are you the chair, Mike, of the trustees, or president?
Yes, board chair.
Board chair, awesome. Well, thank you so much for
one of those positions that you get and nobody else wants, so you kind of get stuck in a position.
They just keep, Mike, if you could just keep helping us out. I do ask that everyone remain on mute throughout this morning as we give each of our legislators a chance to speak and provide their updates. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to use the chat feature and send those, and then myself and my associate Angie Hicks will be watching for those questions, and we'll do those towards the end. And then if we still have time, we can open it up to allow people to unmute to ask their questions. So just to be respectful of everyone's time and the sound and everything, if you would just stay muted. And I think, looking to see if that's all my housekeeping. Oh, I should introduce and recognize who we have here with us this morning. So we have State Senator for District 33, Alicia Straub. So Alicia, give a little wave. There we go. State Representative for District 109, Troy Waymaster. Thanks, Troy, for being here. State Representative for District 112, Tory Arnberger. Thank you, Tory. And then State Representative for District 113, Brett Fairchild. So Brett is all with us. You can, if depending on who's speaking, you can change your view. I'm looking at gallery view, but you can put it on speaker view, so that way you can see the legislator a little more up close, if you will. So with that, again, keep your questions in the chat feature now, but I will turn it over to you, Mike, to kick us off.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate having the representatives and senator with us this morning. We know it's a busy time in Topeka. We're a week after turnaround, so there's a lot going on in the Capitol. So I think this morning we'll do, as we've always done in the past, we'll just have some brief opening comments from each individual, kind of outlining maybe the committees they're on and some of the important things that they've seen happen and been involved with so far in this session. So we'll start it off with our Senator, Alicia Straub. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize if there's some background noise. We're actually in Pratt doing another legislative coffee. I had a number of them scheduled across the district today, so I apologize if you get some background noise. Again, my name is Alicia, and grew up in between Elwyn and Great Bend, and the committees I serve on in the Senate are Senate Education, Ag. I am the vice chair of the Senate Ag Committee. I serve on local government, transparency and ethics, and commerce. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about those committees when the time is appropriate. And anyway, again, I serve the 33rd district, which includes 12 central and western Kansas counties. It's Pratt, Stafford, Barton, part of Rice, Rush, Ness, Lane, Scott, part of Hodgman, and Pawnee, Edwards, and Kiowa. So I have approximately 1/10, slightly over 1/10 the land area of Kansas is in the 33rd Senate District. It's quite an area. So anyway, thank you all for joining us this morning, and I'm happy to answer your questions later.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. Now we'll move on to Representative Tory Arnberger.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tory Marie Arnberger, state rep for the Great Bend, Hoisington, and Red Wing district. But the committees I serve on is Federal and State Affairs, which I'm the vice chair of, Health and Human Services, and General Government Budget. With General Government Budget, we have finished all of our work on that committee. Health and Human Services, we've had quite a few bills come through. This year, we had kind of a late start because the revisor's office got they updated their bill system. And so some of the bills took a while to get out of drafting and get introduced on the floor. And then for Federal and State Affairs, that's the committee that has been so busy. At the very beginning, we passed out Value Them Both. And next, some other bills that we have, and that's passed out on the House and Senate floor. So that is very exciting. That'll be on the ballot. I'm sure that we'll have some questions about that. Some other bills that we have worked on, we've had lots of alcohol bills, and they're very minor bills sometimes, but how it is written in the statute that unless it states that you can do this in alcohol jurisdiction, then it is prohibited. So we've had a lot of minor things that have passed out in the 1980s that we need to update now, because obviously liquor by the drink is not a thing, and stuff like that. We've had medical marijuana, which I'm sure we'll have questions about that. We had a hearing on that on the House side. It was a 2-day hearing. The next step that the chair stated is that he wants to go through section by section, because there are 67 sections in this bill. And so there's a lot going on. So we want to go through section by section. I had another group come in and talk to me who they are in favor of it, but they have 28 amendments that they want us to make in committee. So clearly we need to go through this, and if we're going to pass medical marijuana, we need to make sure that we have the best of the best bill possible, other than just passing it real quick. And the last thing we've discussed in that committee is sports betting. That passed out on the House side. We're waiting. We had a hearing on the House side. Our bill on the House side is completely different than it passed on the Senate side. The bill on the House side is completely different than the Senate side. And so the Senate passed out their version. We're waiting for it to come to us. It'll most likely go to conference, and we will have a bill that is a little bit of both, is what I'm assuming. And then the last thing I want to talk about is I am co-chair of the Future Caucus, which is members under 40. We've had this in Kansas for a couple years now, but when I came on as the Republican co-chair, the Democrat co-chair was Brandon Whipple, which he then got elected as mayor of Wichita. And so then it just kind of left me all by myself, and I needed help with some stuff. So this year we have an awesome board. We have we have a Republican co-chair and a Democrat co-chair, and a Republican vice co-chair and a Democrat vice co-chair. So we have a board of 4, and we submitted testimony on the first-time homeowners bill, savings account bill, and so that passed out both House and Senate. And so anyways, it was just, that was a nice win for us, because that is really going to affect our generation, those who are the next leaders of Kansas. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Representative. Now we'll move on to Representative Ryan Fairchild. Good morning, Ryan.
You can sit a little bit.
It's actually Brett Fairchild.
Sorry, Brett.
Mike is just really excited for the new brewery to open up downtown.
Oh, yeah.
That's owned by Ryan Fairchild.
Yeah, I'm Brett Fairchild. I represent the 113th district. I have represent all of Stafford County, all of Pratt County, a little bit of Rice County, a little bit of Barton County, and the very eastern part of Pawnee County. And I'm a freshman representative. I ran a couple of years ago and lost, and ran again this time and did a little bit better this time. I serve on the Agriculture Committee, Water Committee, and the Higher Ed Budget Committee. And, it's been a good experience serving on all those committees. I've learned quite a bit. I wasn't really prepared to, talk about the bills that we've been going through in committee. So I was just going to talk a little bit more generally about some of the things we've been working on in the legislature. Like recently, we've been working on the KEMA bill, the Kansas Emergency Management Act, trying to reform that and to permanently put in place some limits and restrictions on the governor's power. A lot of us just think that she went, a little bit too far during the pandemic as far as closing down churches and some of these other things that we think, infringe on civil liberties. And so we're trying to reform that act and put some limits on her power. And, it's a little bit tricky because we have to get to 84 votes in the House and 27 in the Senate to get the 2/3 to override her veto. And if we make the bill a little bit too strong, then we lose some of our more moderate members. If we make it too weak, we lose some of the more conservative members. So it's kind of a balancing act. And, both the House and the Senate have passed that bill and it's in conference committee. And so that's what's going on right now, trying to come up with an agreement and trying to, come up with something that could actually get to 2/3. And so, that's one of the big bills that we're working on right now. And so I just thought, it'd be good to provide that update.
Thank you, Brett. We appreciate you attending this morning. Finally, the senior member of the group, Representative Troy Waymaster.
All right, thank you, Mike. And I do have to apologize if there's some background noise. My 2-year-old is stuck in his car in the same room that I am. And so I apologize for that. He keep calling for me. But I'm Troy Waymaster, the state representative for the 109th Kansas House District, and I represent 7 counties in central and north central Kansas, the entire counties of Smith, Osborne, and Russell, and then portions of Jewell, Lincoln, Barton, and Rush counties. This is my 5th term. It's hard to believe that I've been here that long. And right now I serve as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. So our obvious duty has been to work through the budget for the state of Kansas for fiscal year 2021, 2022, and then also into some instances into 2023. Obviously, last year, we abruptly ended the legislative session, and there were a lot of budget items that was, I would say, left on the table because we were not able to come back when we had our, the ceremonious final day of the legislative session in May. And so when we had those items left on the table, and then we also had the allotments that were made by the governor, given by the projections that were made by the Consensus Revenue Estimate Group in April, which had us in a very dire financial situation for the state of Kansas. We were looking at an almost $800 million deficit for fiscal year 2022. Those figures changed in November, which was starkly more positive for the state of Kansas. And then obviously we've been exceeding the Revenue Estimate Group numbers for all the months with the exception of one. I believe that was in May of 2020 when we did not exceed the estimations. And so we're actually sitting in a very healthy financial position. So when we've gone through the budget process, as Representative Arnberger and then also Representative Fairchild had mentioned, they serve on budget committees. We have heard the recommendations from all of the budget committees with the exception of one, and that is the K through 12 Education Budget Committee. And the reason why we haven't heard from them yet is because most of the funding, actually I should say all the funding for K through 12 education is inserted into House Bill 2119. Although it is included in the budget, it is also included in House Bill 2119. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions in regards to that particular piece of legislation. So it depends on how that moves through the legislative process on how we're going to address that with the budget. But the intention is when we get back to the Capitol on Monday, I think the Senate is right now planning on running their budget bill on the Senate floor on Tuesday. And then the House Appropriations Committee is, right now we're scheduled to start working our budget bill in the middle or latter part of next week. So that's just kind of a little bit of an update. I'm sure we can discuss some of the more the issues and nuances going on with the legislative process. But once again, thank you for having me. And I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Well, thank you very much for the opening comments. I know we'll kick off with some questions now. I'd like to start with one question. I know one of the big topics right now is the utility bills and the high utility bills that we're seeing. I know that's a pretty complicated issue. There's a lot more to that than just the usage of someone may have in their business or in their home. Does anyone have any details, comments on what goes into those increased costs and the complications of that issue?
I would love the opportunity to jump in on this. So we actually had the let's see, I think it was House substitute for Senate Bill 88. We had a vote on that last week, and that bill would allow to use state idle funds to provide low interest loans to our municipal utilities. And I actually was the only senator to vote against that bill, and it passed the House 124-0. So I was one against 162. I'll give you my reasoning on that. What happened that week in February was obviously unforeseen, but consumption during that period did maybe doubled and maybe not even doubled. So if we're thinking about utility bills, if the price had stayed the same or near the same, your utility bill should be approximately double what it normally is. That's not what happened. The consumption did not increase 10 to 11 times. It was the utility rate, the cost to make that energy, or the cost of gas to produce that energy. So I don't feel like the consumer, our constituents, should be held accountable for decisions that were made by other people. I'm not elected to negotiate utility rates. I'm not paid to negotiate utility rates. My job is to protect the consumer, to protect the constituent. So I voted against that bill because what people did not realize is ultimately the consumer, our constituents, are the ones who will still end up paying those outrageous utility bills. They would just be spread over a large period of time. There are current investigations going on through the Kansas Attorney General's office, and I believe there's also maybe a federal investigation going on concerning price gouging. So anyway, I just want to let people know why I was the lone vote and why I voted against that. We were basically I'll try to think how to say this nicely. That bill came to us and was fed to us very quickly. And I said in Republican caucus, I'm not drinking this Kool-Aid. I'm not buying this one. Anyway, I think it was fed to us as it was an emergency, and the emergency had already passed. So I don't think it was an emergency. And I absolutely think the municipal utilities and the gas companies could come to some sort of agreement, some sort of payment in the meantime, while these investigations are completed. So there's my thoughts on the issue. I would love to hear any other arguments, but basically it was presented to us as an emergency. But like I said, the emergency had already passed. The weather had already passed. It's the bills, the outrageous bills coming due is what we were told was the emergency.
Thank you, Senator. Any other comments on that topic?
I stand by my vote in supporting it. I do think it was an emergency to have to pay for these bills. It is spread across the consumers who are our constituents. And I have Great Bend, who has Wheatland Electric. I live outside of Great Bend, which has Midwest, but then I also have Boisington that has their own municipal utility. So, and they needed the help. So I do think it was an emergency, and I'm glad that we were able to pass the bill on the House and Senate floor and have it signed all within 24 hours.
Well, and the only thing that I would probably add, and I agree with Tory, and I also agree with Alicia. The situation that occurred in February with the Arctic temperatures that hit the midsection of the United States caused great peril for our utilities due to the fact that we did not have the production in place to have those higher energy expenditures. The price of natural gas for years has been considerably lower than where it probably should be on the market price. And so that drew production down. And so when you didn't have the production levels where they needed to be for that particular time, when we had very cold temperatures through the midsection of the United States, that's what shot the price up. And so I think the state did need to act in some manner. Obviously, we couldn't address everything in regards to the energy prices. We don't exactly know what the utility costs are going to be to the consumer. But setting up this loan program for the municipalities in regards to the utility costs was a way for us to, in a way, buffer those increased costs that may be going to the consumer. But I would agree, it was done very expeditiously. And yesterday when I was on the phone with the state treasurer, and there were some pieces that was left out of the fiscal note that we have to go back and address in the budget in regards to that particular piece of legislation.
The dollar amount that was put in that bill, was it $100 million is what was put in there, set aside initially?
Yes, it was 100 million, but one thing that we did not factor in, it was in the fiscal note, but it wasn't necessarily in the fiscal amount for the bill, was legal costs, legal fees. And so that's something that we have to go back and address for the state treasurer's office when we put the budget together.
And I believe after we passed the bill, I believe they're already, a town has already entered into a lawsuit. And I don't know if anybody else, I remember reading that article, and I'm gonna see if I can pull it up from Sunflower Journal, that it was to deal with price gouging.
Thank you all.
I might add one more thing. I think part of the component to this that I want to make sure the public fully understands is that, you know, regulations have required a certain amount of renewable energy to come from wind. And in Kansas, we obviously have a great natural resource in all the wind that we have. And the problem is we export that wind energy to places like Florida. And in caucus, I had even suggested that, hey, you know, we need to get some more dogs in this fight. Pass the cost on down the line to Florida with the wind energy that we export. It's not fair that gas prices skyrocket like that because we have, through regulations, they have required such and such amount of percentage of our energy to be from renewables. It's just not fair. And we also provide ridiculous tax exemptions to wind farms, often 10 to 20 years. So it just, to me, it doesn't make sense to charge the consumer for mistakes that were made either through regulations or either through price gouging. So the reason I did not support that bill is because ultimately, in some way, that's acknowledging that the consumer would be responsible for that bill. And I just don't think that the consumer should be held responsible for it. I understand the municipals, the cities needing to pay their bills, but that's between them to negotiate with those gas companies to pay a certain amount by a certain time. And that's not for the legislature to negotiate. So that's where I stood on that.
Thank you very much. Megan, do you have a question for us?
I do. Rhonda Knudsen is on here with us this morning, and she asks, is the legislature doing anything regarding the unemployment fraud issue that has been affecting so many in the state?
I'll take that one up. Obviously, with the onset of the pandemic and a lot of Kansans, especially when there was the order to have non-essential businesses shut down for 5 weeks last spring, we were going to see a number of Kansans who were going to be filing unemployment claims. We were also aware, and this would be, I would say the Republican side was also very cognizant of the fact that we're going to see an increase in fraudulent claims. And this was something that we brought forward many times in the State Finance Council from June up until December. And we were aware that there were going to be fraudulent claims, and they're probably going to increase fraudulent claims. Obviously, I think everything kind of precipitated in January when there was kind of an acknowledgement from the administration that there were fraudulent claims, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And so we had two bills. We had 2195, which was heard in the House Appropriations Committee, and we had 2196, that bill was heard in the Commerce and Economic Development Committee in the House. Those two bills, when we had hearings, actually initiated the administration and the Kansas Department of Labor to shut down the system and then reopen it the next following Tuesday. And then in the 4 days after that new system was put into place with fraudulent measures, there was almost 1 million claims that were fraudulent that were stopped. Now, the question is why wasn't this put into place on the onset of the pandemic? It should have been. Now, there was also a legislative post audit that said there was probably $600 million or maybe even more that was paid off in fraudulent claims, and we'll never get that money back. Probably a majority of that money is overseas, and there's no jurisdiction for us to go back and recoup those funds. Now, I know the Kansas Department of Labor and the Attorney General's office is also working on the fraudulent claims that might be within the confines of the United States boundary. But if they left and went overseas, there's no way for us to get that money back. So all of us are aware that the $1.9 trillion bill passed the United States Congress, was signed by the president actually on Thursday, and they did the formal signing yesterday. And the state of Kansas, we still are kind of working out the definitions and the details of what the state of Kansas is going to be receiving from that. But, you know, in conversations that I've had with the speaker and other members of leadership in the House, if the state of Kansas does receive some money from the federal government, we would like to have a majority of that diverted to the unemployment fund to help out the legitimate unemployment claims from Kansans so they can receive those unemployment benefits. But like I said, we're still, you know, this is obviously very new with this particular relief package that was passed. So we'll just have to see exactly what type of strings are tied to the money and what that could be used for. But numerous times in the State Finance Council, we tried to divert some of the CARES Act money that went through the Spark Committee and then approved by the State Finance Council. And we had numerous amendments in the State Finance Council to have that money directed to the Unemployment Insurance Fund. And we were always vetoed by the governor until December. And then basically it was stated that from the CARES Act money that was left over from the little over $1 billion that we received from the federal government in June, any money left over by the deadline of December 30th, 2020 would be transferred into the Unemployment Insurance Fund. However, that did not occur because Congress extended the deadline. And so that negated the amendment that was made in the State Finance Council. But this is obviously an issue that we are going to continually address for this legislative session and also legislative sessions to come.
I just want to add on there, it's extremely frustrating how we're getting, I mean, I'm sure just like everybody else, but we are getting emails upon emails and phone calls. I can't get my unemployment, or I can't get through, and I know the governor issued that over, I think it's over this weekend, actually, they are getting ready to vamp up. So they're going to have 500. I don't know if Troy or somebody else, is it 500 additional or 500 total phone lines?
I don't really know the number. I know they've signed on for a call center to assist with the unemployment claims. But I think kind of what Tory, it might be leading towards here is, you know, it's very unfortunate that we paid out all these fraudulent claims, but we have legitimate Kansans who have unemployment claims that are legitimate, who can't even get in contact with the Department of Labor. And I've probably spent more time this legislative session, and actually before legislative session started, trying to assist constituents and also other individuals throughout the state of Kansas in just getting through the Department of Labor. And it's very frustrating when we hear the amount of fraudulent claims that have been paid out, but then yet we have constituents that are hurting because they have not been able to get through.
Yes, that is exactly where I was getting at. And it's to the point where the other day I had a phone call and I called the gal back, and she was having a panic attack because she's about to get evicted and she hasn't been paid in so long. She's about to get her kids taken away. And you hear all these stories, and we are trying to help, but we are doing everything we can, but I cannot be the person over there hitting accept to get your money, to get you your unemployment claim. And so that is just the hard part, is we're that's legit, when I get back from all of my committee meetings, I have a stack of while you were out papers of people calling to get their unemployment claims, and they can't. And it's very, very, very unfortunate and frustrating. So hopefully with adding these additional lines, call center folks, everything, that we can get this going, and we need to be putting Kansans first.
I have a perspective on this. The legislature makes the laws. The governor, the executive branch, carries out those laws. And I think what we've seen in the Department of Labor, the Secretary of Labor is appointed by the governor. We've seen a complete failure of that department. I know that they were notified last year, or they were advised last year to shut the system down. They're working on a computer system that's 30 to 40 years old, and they've also been advised that it's not scalable, it's not secure, which they knew last year. And obviously the hackers and foreign fraudulent activity has targeted Kansas specifically. Kansas has seen more fraudulent claims than California and Texas, and I think New York combined. We will be hearing a bill about unemployment insurance next week in Senate Commerce. We'll be working that next week. And the department started out with over $1 billion in unemployment insurance funds, and it sounds like they have expended over half of that on just fraudulent claims alone. We're hearing figures that they've paid out over $600 million in fraudulent claims, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. I cannot understand how the governor's office, who, like I said, carries out the laws set by the legislature. I don't understand how she could allow that to happen last year while the legislature was not in session. We don't operate that department. We just set the laws and the budget by which they operate under. But the actual activity of their department is where the I'm trying to think of the right word. Anyway, they have not been successful in dispersing unemployment fairly. So because of all the fraudulent claims, they're not able to process the actual legitimate claims that we're getting from Kansans. And that's a huge problem. So I think even with 500 more customer service people, it's still not going to fix the system, because I'm also understanding that they're still not, you call into a person, they are not able to access the PUA side of the system. They're not combined. Like, they can't pull that up on their computer and check on that for you. So that's where part of the disconnect is. I don't see a quick fix to this. In fact, I still think it may almost be faster to go back to good old-fashioned pen and paper, and the only claims that will be processed are those that are filed in your local county courthouse with an actual person and stamped and submitted directly to the state. I think that's the only way for us to actually be only paying legitimate claims. But again, that's just my opinion on the matter. And I know it's a huge problem. So I hope we can come up with a better solution soon.
Well, the only thing I might add is, obviously there's been, with the pandemic in general, it's actually had us look back and make upgrades that we have always put off, just because of the sheer cost. So in the governor's budget, and Tory, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the general government budget recommendation for the Kansas Department of Labor, there is a system upgrade of $47 million. That was a line item in the governor's budget. It actually passed out of the general government budget committee for that system upgrade, but that's not going to be an immediate fix. That's going to take time to implement that new system. And this system has been talked about since the early 2000s, that we needed to upgrade this, and it's just perpetually been put off just because of the sheer cost. Now, a lot of people have asked me, they said, well, let's just take that remaining money that we have from the CARES money or the CARES 2 money, or then obviously the money that's going to be coming in. Well, that depends on how the federal government allows us to use those funds. The state of Iowa tried to do system upgrades with the CARES Act money, and actually that money is being pulled back by the federal government because they said that's not a intended purpose for those funds. So whenever we receive federal money, even though as great as that may sound, we have to be careful of what the federal government has as guidelines and the strictness of what those funds can be utilized for. And so most likely we are going to probably move forward with the system upgrade with the Kansas Department of Labor. And that'll be a state general fund expense as it was recommended by the General Government Budget Committee. But upgrades are coming, but it's not going to be an immediate fix of what we're dealing with right now in regards to the unemployment claims.
Thank you. Megan, another question?
Yes. Julie Cramp is asking if you can discuss a little bit about the CCBHC legislation, Senate Bill 138 and House Bill 2160.
Yeah, I'll take this one for the House side. So the CCBHC, which is a very hard acronym to get all those letters in the right order.
Yeah.
Yes, so we passed it out of the House committee. The hard part is there is a large fiscal note with it, but it'll help out in the long run with mental health. We already have, I believe, I want to say 6 mental health centers that they filed to get the waiver to and they're working on the process of becoming one. So with the CCBHCs, the other part with the fiscal note is, and I've talked to some of the other lobbyists, it's not correct. And I think it said, and I'm guessing on this, I think it said anywhere between like 45 million to 72 million, and that's just not correct. So right now we passed out a committee, we're trying to find a funding mechanism for it. One of the questions or one of the bills that were brought forward was the 988 number, which is the suicide prevention number that we're trying to get implemented. So if Kansas doesn't even touch that, it's still going to be a thing because the federal government passed it. I believe it's in 2022 or 2023. But the funding mechanism on the 988 was they wanted to add a 50-cent tax per line of phone numbers to help pay for it. Well, in the end, that's going to bring in $25 million. And so that's way more than that number needs. So one of the questions was, well, this mental health has to deal with, mental health folks, they deal with suicide, they deal with all of that. So what if we were to utilize those funds towards the CCBHC part of that fiscal note? So I do know that it passed out of the House committee. It was on the committee of the whole. Below it was just below the line. It got blessed. So when a bill gets blessed, it has to go to one of the exempt committees. They probably all went to appropriations, and then it comes back. Well, it actually got sent back to the committee of the whole. We were supposed to work it earlier last week, and instead the chair wants to look at it and say, well, since we don't really have the correct funding mechanism, let's see if we can do a phased in approach. So that hasn't been passed out yet. That's just what we're talking about, and doing a 3-year phase in, so that way we can get all of our, I believe there's 27 or 23 mental health communities, so get them all to be CCBHC certified and so forth. And I don't know if Alicia, if you know where it's at on the Senate side, or if they even touched it or any of that.
I was thinking that there was I've got some background noise here. I was thinking there was a component in another bill, and I was just looking to see because I believe we just voted on a bill last week that included this community mental health center, and it may have been a different, I can't remember if that would just allow those mental health centers to not, to kind of operate somewhat like a mental health hospital. I'll have to do some more looking, because I don't serve on Health and Human Services. So the bill was not first and foremost in my mind, but I do recall us coming across this last week, and I did support it. So I'll have to do some more checking. Yeah.
There's a lot to the mental health arena, if that's what you want to call it. I know that we had the mental health over this. I was on the interim committee, the mental health it was a task force. It was a reform of it. And so we went in and we had lots of meetings and lots of side meetings to figure out what is important. How do we have all of these studies that have been done for mental health, and then it just sits on a shelf. And then we do another study, and we have a governor's task force, and then they get together and they do this great study, and it just sits on a shelf. And so what we are doing now is we took all of the information that we've had. They made this great crosswalk to show all of the work that's been done in the past 5 years. These are the recommendations, but none of the recommendations are being implemented. So with the chair of health, she came in and she said, I'm tired of us spending money on studies and we're not utilizing them. Let's put them to work. And so the CCBHC portion was one of the components that was a top priority for the mental health task force interim committee. And so it's been nice because we have taken, because that was one of the things that was said was, so what is top priority? What do we need to do? And so then they created what our recommendations were and they put them into bill form. And so with the chair being a huge proponent of the mental health communities, our community, that is what we are doing right now. And the CCBHC is part of it.
Thank you. Any other comments on that topic?
Nick has his hand up. Nick, is your comment with regard to this specific discussion?
Well, it kind of sort of is. It's more of a question / comment. Go ahead. Okay.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for all being here. My name is Nick Reinecker from Inman, Kansas. And besides a balanced budget and school choice, which I'm an advocate for, a lot of focus right now have been on alcohol issues, tobacco, gaming, mental health, substance use issues, and criminal justice, with the sprinkling of agriculture, utilities, and license plates. Nonetheless, some of you on this meeting know that I can give a diatribal thesis about why cannabis should be descheduled from the Controlled Substances Act, including campaign finance issues like altria and equity between substances and their individual and capitalistic freedom. However, I would just ask that you would get this done so it is not another election issue. For myself as a Republican, I watched as Kobach and Trump lost, and because of this green leafy substance stigma and prohibition consequences, many people think that these individuals are racist, or at least not individual government, individual liberty, states' rights, conservative Republicans. And for this agriculture state and our citizenry, this has been a disaster on its own. Ironically, this one issue shares not only bipartisan support, but I would argue that if given the chance with a constitutional amendment, it would pass. But we are a constitutional republic, and as much as I believe in the grand jury process, I'm not a fan of codified petition laws. So it is imperative that the legislature does the right thing, gets the leadership to make this a priority, because it is a shame to grow government by making this one plant three through changing definitions like hemp, marijuana, and medical marijuana or cannabis. But whatever you do, if you call it medical without the FDA, you must provide for home grow and Second Amendment defense. Also, please, a better understanding of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders and needs to be had by not only legislators, but also the citizens, and accountability when it comes to the Problem Gaming and Addictions Grant Fund, including KDAD's AAPS grants and the governor's domestic violence and child advocacy grants. As Senator Waymaster pointed out, this would also include better accountability of the Economic Development Initiative Fund. Finally, using the marketing and selling of gambling delivery devices like lottery ticket vending machines to fund crisis services, CCBHCs, and or substance use services, including diagnosis, is not how I want you to spend state-generated gambling revenue. Also, again, please deschedule cannabis from the State Controlled Substances Act. Thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Any comments on cannabis from the legislators?
I can kind of go through it. I kind of went over it a little bit earlier on medical marijuana. Like I said, we had a 2-day hearing on it, and the next step is to go through section by section, especially too if there are 28 amendments already drafted with one lobbying group. I can only imagine what's going to be happening with everybody who's interested in this. I know one of the major topics right now is to remove the Department of Ag. I've actually talked to Kenny Titus, who is a Great Bend grad. He's one of the chief, I think he is the chief counsel for Department of Ag. And so he called me actually yesterday, and we talked, and he said, look, we don't, with everything going on and with the FDA, all of that, we don't want any part of it. I asked him about the major thing I was curious on was, what about when it comes to growing? Doesn't the Department of Ag want to be a part of it? And he said, no. And it doesn't go hand in hand with industrial hemp like people think that it does. It needs to be completely separate. And so that's where we're at right now on that. I don't know with some of these amendments. I know right now in the Kansas bill, we are modeling ours based off of Ohio's legislation, which makes it non-smokable. And so that is one way to, and I agree with that. Am I 100% in favor of medical marijuana? I don't want to say that I am, because I am really worried that it leads to recreational. And I don't think that is smart. And I want to, if Kansas is going to pass medical marijuana, it needs to be a conservative bill. And so some people, all they care about is the tax dollars. Well, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable passing something just to get tax dollars. And I understand, and I want it to be utilized for the right health reasons. And so that's why we are looking at how each state is doing it. And so that's why they're looking at Ohio, but we've also heard from other folks that the Ohio bill is a mess. So it just depends, what side of the fence do you want to be on? And the Ohio bill is a very conservative bill. So that's kind of, I know that they said that in 2 years, just based off of what we have proposed. They told me the other day that it was $98 million in 2 years that we could bring in. So.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, actually, I just kind of wanted to touch base on what, and Tory's going to have more knowledge on that since she serves on the Federal and State Affairs Committee, and obviously the bills in regards to whether it's medicinal marijuana or if it's recreational marijuana is going to go to that committee. And the one thing that I would only add is, I'm willing to have the conversation on medical marijuana. We had that discussion on the House floor a couple of years ago, and I'm willing to have that conversation. However, I agree with Tory that when you open up that door, then eventually down the line, you're opening up for recreational marijuana. And that is something I do not think the state of Kansas needs to do. And the reason why I say that is I have a lot of individuals, especially when we're having the K through 12 funding issue, they're saying, well, just legalize marijuana and tax it, and then have that revenue then go through K through 12 education. But I met with the Senate Majority Leader of Colorado a few years ago. And he said, by all means, do not pass recreational marijuana in the state of Kansas because it's been devastating to the state of Colorado. And I said, well, we always hear about how much revenue it's bringing in and how that's going into this, state government and everything. He goes, no, we're spending far more on law enforcement than we're bringing in the state of Colorado. Yeah, they focus on how much it generates in revenue. However, they do not talk about how much it is actually costing the state of Colorado to have recreational marijuana in the state. Also, what you've been seeing in Colorado is you've been having, since it's been legalized recreationally, you've been seeing people not traveling to Colorado. The ski resorts are losing patrons who have been going there for years because they're worried about their safety when they're on the mountains. And so it's actually had outgoing effects. And the other thing that the state majority leader told me is that it's actually created an underground society within, especially the city of Denver, but also the state of Colorado as a whole, because you're able to grow this and sell it legally, but everybody wants to get away from actually having it taxed. So what it done is it created this underground society where they're selling recreational marijuana to get away from paying the tax. So there are two aspects to this issue. Yes, I mean, everybody focuses on how much revenue it generates in the states that have passed it, but what they are not talking about is how much it actually costs the states and also the local law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And actually that cost is outspending the amount of money that's being brought in to the particular states.
Thank you.
I was just wanting to speak on this really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've discussed this issue with Nick before. He and I are friends, and yeah, I kind of take more the point of view that he takes, that, you know, more libertarian point of view, government hands off, you know, because I think that's kind of what we're supposed to believe as conservatives and Republicans, is that, you know, that we should have less government interference in people's lives and, you know, just let people do what they want as long as they're not harming others. And so, you know, I do take a little bit different point of view on this. And, you know, it's not something I really talked about a whole lot because, you know, it's a little bit controversial, but I just think, you know, as a state, we spend quite a bit of money arresting and incarcerating people for cannabis or marijuana related offenses. And I just feel like it's sort of a waste of taxpayer money to be doing that. And that, you know, in the legislature, in the Kansas legislature, we pass, you know, all these bills that constantly expand alcohol sales. You know, we're constantly doing that, and we're easier to sell alcohol, yet if we weren't to legalize cannabis, if we were to at least just decriminalize it and make it more like a fine instead of prison time, that would at least be a big step in the right direction. Or if we were to just say that, you know, if somebody wants to grow it in their own backyard, we're not going to send a police officer into somebody's backyard to arrest them for doing that. I think there's at least some good reforms that we could take, even if we're not going to go as far as Colorado and, you know, completely legalize it and tax it. At least have some sort of decriminalization to where we're not spending taxpayer money on, you know, arresting and incarcerating people for that type of thing. I think that would be a good criminal justice reform in our state to take, so that we could not be spending, you know, all that taxpayer money on incarcerating people for something that really doesn't directly harm anyone else. And so, you know, I take a more libertarian position on that. And, you know, that's a position that's supported by the vast majority of Americans. And, you know, polls even say that, you know, here in Kansas, that most people are either in favor of legalization or at least some sort of decriminalization of cannabis. That's kind of the position that more people are moving in. But I think the legislature, you know, really doesn't reflect the point of view of the people of Kansas and the people of the United States. And so I guess I just wanted to provide a little bit of a different perspective on that issue.
Thank you.
One other thing real quick, I just want to add that we had a lot of discussion on, and he's a sheriff deputy, Representative Eric Smith. He's a sheriff deputy that's on Fed and State. And one thing that I agree with him on is there's no way to test when someone's driving if they're driving while high. There's no breathalyzer for it. And so that is one thing that does concern me, is that it's just the same thing of just because you can drink at the age of 21 doesn't mean you can come to work drunk. That's what worries me about coming with legalizing marijuana, is what's going to happen, and are people going to be driving while high and so forth. I don't know how. I'm going to be very upfront. I'm not educated enough in the cannabis industry. But from what I've learned so far, those are some of my concerns.
Thank you. Megan, another question?
Can I go back real fast to that, the CCBHC question? It was Senate Bill 238, which I did vote in favor of supporting, and that bill would require KDADs to certify as a CCBHC any community mental health center licensed by KDADs that provides, you know, diagnostic, assessment, screening, risk assessment, treatment plans, outpatient screening. There's a whole list of things, but if you look up the Senate Bill 238, that will give you the details on the certified community behavioral health clinics, the question that we just had prior to this one. And concerning medical marijuana, I would support a strictly monitored prescribed prescription program for medicinal marijuana, but I do not support recreational.
Thank you for the follow-up.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Megan?
Alicia. Yeah, so here's a question from Pamela. Where do you stand on Senate Bill 172, and why is there a need for this legislation that deals strictly with protests for utilities? Originally, specifically for oil pipelines, this bill would classify any such protest as racketeering activity. It also deals with graffiti or damage, trespassing, which seems redundant. We already have laws against such actions.
What bill was that?
I'm trying to scroll back up here on my chat. It's not in the same window. 172.
172.
172. Let me look that up real quick. I don't know a lot about it, so that's why I need to look it up real quick.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. Why is there a need for it? It deals strictly with protests for utilities. Classify those protests as racketeering. If you want to look that up, I can ask another question. If that's okay.
Okay.
I think I can speak to, we just voted on this last week. Sorry, I was confused by the way it was presented. So that bill actually, I believe, makes it a crime to damage or trespass on a critical infrastructure facility. So say somebody broke into the city water plant and, dumped something into the city's water supply, that would increase the penalties and the severity level of those crimes. And that was really the main underlying premise of that bill. If somebody is questioning something else, I'm not familiar with the other part of that.
And I'm looking it up, and I don't know that much about Senate Bill 172, but it does have a hearing in House Judiciary this Wednesday at 3:30 p.m.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we did have 3 questions around education. That if you legislators, do you have time to address those, or should we send those to you, or how do you feel about going forward?
Brett and I both have another appointment here at lunch. We've got a full day today. If you would like to email me, you can email me on my legislature email, which is a black hole, by the way. You can find that on kslegislature.org as well as everybody else's, but the best way to email me is at Straub for Kansas, spell it all out, Straub for Kansas @gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me.
Alicia, is that the number 4 or spelled out 4?
Spell out for FOR.
Okay,
yes.
I'm just dropping it here in the so I can email you these 3 questions and then let you know who to follow up with as well. So
absolutely. Brett, do you want to give them your email?
Well, you can either email me at my personal account or my legislative account. I think it's just brett.fairchild@house.kansas.gov, and my personal one is fairchild_2@hotmail.com.
Same, because I need to get to work, and I'm glad we were able to do Zoom, so I'm able to get back to my other job. But same, if you could email them to me, that would be great.
perfect.
Same here. And it's just troy.waymaster@house.ks.gov.
And mine's torymarie.arnberger@house.ks.gov.
Very good. Well, I know the legislators have busy schedules. We appreciate their time giving us this morning. Hope they have a successful rest of the session. And thanks to everyone for attending, and have a good rest of the weekend. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
You too.
You too.
Megan, thank you for the chamber for putting this together.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. Have a great weekend, everyone.